the both of the
Oh,
fibers.
did you hear that?
I got
That's why I think it can't.
Modernas, and then so it's not that
Yeah.
common anymore.
No feedback, but if you did anything,
Hi, Dave Rollins.
But I don't have this on the air, so it
You're struggling.
We are going.
We're going.
All right, I want to welcome everyone. I apologize if my voice will be muted because of my mask, but a little bit of a health issue, but it is, I assure you it's not COVID, but that's the challenge in my life. Anyway, this is the city of Cottonwood Heights. It's Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. Just after 5 p.m. This is our work session. We have a very heavy agenda, so we'll try and move quickly. And the first item that we will move to is item number 2, which is a debt review discussion with Zions Bank. And invite Jonathan up to the table if you want, Jonathan, and share with us an opportunity we have to save the city some money.
Yeah, Mayor and Council and staff, it's nice to be with you. My name is Jonathan Ward with Science Public Finance. There's a presentation that we'll be showing, it sounds like, and I've got hard copies that in Tim's possession so we can review. But a few weeks ago, my partner and I, Mark Anderson, came to visit with staff and the mayor and pointed out that interest rates are very low, as you can see on the charts here, relative to where we've been over the last 30 years. We're in a very low interest rate environment. And next slide, Scott, if we would. The next sort of obvious question was, if rates are low, what does our existing debt at Cottonwood Heights look like? So we compared current rates with outstanding rates and concluded, looking at multiple different iterations and scenarios and circumstances, that the city could save some money. So in the next slide, it illustrates sort of our recommended solution. This is a convertible or Cinderella bond structure, we call it, that starts out taxable and converts to tax exempt a little bit later on in the life of the bonds. But right now, as we look at where old rates are on the existing debt compared to new interest rates, taxable for a time, converting to tax exempt later on, as noted there on the screen, it saves the city about $1.2 million over the life of the debt outstanding, or approximately 80 some odd thousand per year between now and final payoff of those bonds. So we looked at those solutions. Again, this was the one that we thought made the most sense of various iterations or different scenarios. One of the reasons we really like this Cinderella structure is that it involves currently a direct purchaser who allows us to prepay bonds when we want. So as we look through the debt of the city outstanding, we say, well, we can refinance, we can save $1.2 million, and we can be able to preserve the option to refinance again if interest rates drop even lower than they are today, which doesn't seem very probable, but it is possible. That was why we liked this particular solution. So the debt refinance opportunity makes a lot of sense to us. I'd be happy to answer questions about the process, about the numbers, or anything else you have.
I think it's, John, it's important to maybe share with the council that the practice of refunding and refinancing is quite common.
Oh, yeah.
I know with the service area, we've had several general obligation bonds over the years, and whenever we had an opportunity to refund and get a lower rate, we would do that to save money. So it's a practice I'm familiar with, and it's proved well. And so when I met with staff and saw the opportunity to save over $80,000 per year on our debt service, I think it's a valuable thing that we want to present to the council and see if this is something you'd like us to pursue going forward. And we have an opportunity. It's kind of like refinancing your home, and the rates fall, or a business or anything else. So you want to take advantage of it.
Is there an origination fee or a point or anything on it? Is that what it is? So Where does that work into the 82 savings, I guess?
Well, he thinks we can go to,
Great,
there's a
yeah.
cost of about 60, $70,000.
$70,000 cost of issuance. That's advisor fees for us. It's trustee fees, escrow agents, escrow verifications, and bond attorney fees. The bond purchasers actually don't charge a whole lot to buy the bonds, so not an origination fee like you're speaking specifically, but there are costs of issuance. And those come out before the savings analysis. So the savings of 1.2 million is after those costs are paid, and you still save $1.2 million. And if you didn't have those costs, it'd be $1,270,000 or thereabouts. Should be noted too, the interest rates here that we've got that we're showing a tick of a 208, AIC of 214. Those are different interest rate mechanisms we use to average the coupons of the bond. That's sort of the average cost. So it's average cost of the transaction now. We're going from basically 4% down to 2% on average. So really good opportunity there. Again, I like the thought that we don't have to give up the prepayment option. Right now, we could save the money, and if rates did drop lower in the next year or 2 years, we could take a look again.
I'll take a seat.
Hey, I wanted to say congratulations to Zions Bank on that ethical business award.
Thank you.
Nicely done.
So Mayor, mention something.
Please, yeah.
So if the council is agreeable and really it's a great opportunity for us, we would start in that process for your consideration and start looking at potentially locking in some rates and then bringing it back to you for final decision. But we wanted your direction as far as locking the rates and moving forward with this.
How soon could we lock that? How soon could we lock it? What's the trend?
Well, trends are, who knows?
Yeah.
So some of the economic data that I was looking at today actually might suggest they could dip a little bit, but we don't know.
It's a gamble.
It is. We're at historically low interest rates right now. So in my mind, trying to lock in makes sense and take advantage because, again, we have a hedge. You know, it's a built-in sort of free option because we have the ability to prepay at any time. So if the rates did drop, we could still take advantage of that. But in the meantime, the sooner we can lock in a rate, the better. One of the things that I would recommend, which if the bond attorneys allow us to do it, and I think they will, and if the council is amenable, we'd authorize, well, we'd get direction to publish in the newspaper a notice called the Notice of Bonds to be issued. We'd do that, and then like Tim was suggesting, we'll come back to the council for official approval of a resolution called the bond resolution. And that resolution would ratify the publication of the notice in the newspaper. That will help us expedite our process a little bit more. Usually we're 45 to 60 days before we can sort of start and close. If we do this notice in the newspaper and then come back to the council at your next city council meeting with the resolution, we can shave that 45 to 60 days down to 30 to 45 days, which will help us lock in the rate a little more easily than like Tim was suggesting.
For Councilor Michael's information, he just got here. This is an opportunity we have to refund our previous bond. I think I mentioned to you once before, and save about 1.2 million. There is a cost of about 60,000 that's before the 1.2 million. It's about $80,000 a year. It's something I've done several times on general obligation bonds, and it's to me and plus we have the right on this. If we did this the way you're proposing, if it gets even better, we could even do it again, which is not always the case. Yeah.
Correct.
Thoughts, comments, concerns?
How could we not do this? We have to do it.
It's a material amount in my opinion, and we're not going to see rates like this again, and it will still come back to the council again.
Yeah, for final approval of the resolution.
Yeah, basically, you're gonna roll the 2014 and 16 issues together.
All together into one issue. Correct. We're not extending the term. We're not changing payment dates. That's all going to stay the same as it currently stands. We're just going to be reducing the interest rates borne so that we pay less interest. That 1.2 million is really just interest saved.
I think UFA this morning, right, didn't we, something similar to this as well?
Yeah, they're discussing.
Refinance, yeah, same thing with Zion.
Yeah, looking at the 2016 bonds that UFSA issued,
Yeah.
those were refunding bonds and new money combined. And yeah, while interest rates are low, it makes a lot of sense to consider it.
Sorry, so the one risk is that we might not get it done quickly enough and the rate could go up. That's
Rates
one
go up, savings drop, they aren't locked. And so when we say 1.2 sort of as an indicative level, they could drop to 1.1 million to $1 million of savings. They could go, the savings could go up as interest rates move, and they are
That's
moving.
the question. I was asking about the interest rates. So you gave a scenario where you advise us to do X, Y, and Z so that we can get the lock.
We can shorten the time
We
frame.
can shorten the time
Yeah.
frame. So when can you get the lock?
Usually they're gonna let us lock for 30 days.
So you could lock tomorrow for
So
30
we could
days
lock-
and then you do the example you shared about the noticing.
If we could close it within 30 days from tomorrow, yes, we wouldn't be able to. We'd first need to get a notice in the newspaper, publish that notice. That triggers a 30-day contest period. And it usually takes a week to get the newspaper approved and ready to go, which is sort of a unique issue now, because a lot of notices aren't even being published in newspapers, but the bond notices still are. So that's why I say if the council's agreeable, we go talk to the bond attorneys and say, prepare the notice that needs to be published. Let's get it published as fast as we can. Come back in the resolution. We're going to say Cottonwood Heights City Council hereby resolves to issue bonds to save some money and ratifies the notice that's already been published, which declares the intent to issue bonds and save the money. That would be my recommendation on the calendar, and we just lay it out
And at
that way.
that time, if rates change to materially, we would be able to reevaluate. Yeah.
You can always say no. Yeah, exactly right.
How soon could we let him know? How soon
Right now,
right now?
Yeah, we'll
That's
start
what
moving
we-
through the process now if the council. is
unless there's
comfortable with that.
opposition. No, it's not a formal vote. Administrative direction is to proceed.
Okay.
Jonathan,
Thanks for
thank
your
you.
time.
Appreciate your service
Yeah.
and tell you what, they received an award. What reward did they receive?
Ethics?
Utah, yeah, Ethical Business Leadership Award.
That was the news.
That is good news. It's better than the alternative. Thank you.
All right, moving ahead on your agenda, review of business meeting agenda. Item number 3. After the pledge, we have citizen comments. Then we have public comment. And this is will be a little bit interesting because I'm sure you've all received numerous communications from residents regarding open space master plan. So Mike, you want to talk about that right now for a moment?
Yes, I'd appreciate a few minutes to just
Yeah.
kind of go through that. I want to cover just quickly, first of all, some general updates from the last time this was in front of the council. It's not a ton, but it makes sense to work through that. If I can change one slide here. There we go. So a lot of the comments refer to this as the Little Cottonwood Creek Trail Plan, and it I think, as the council's aware, is a much broader scope plan than that. But just, and I plan to preface the public comment with this slideshow as well. But the plan is for parks, trails, and open space citywide. And really, we're looking at this master plan as kind of an addendum or supplement to the city general plan, which speaks to how broad and long range it is as a document. So it's intended to provide a long range and broad vision and provide recommendations for future budget policy and land use decisions related to parks, trails, and open space throughout the city. It's a citywide master plan. This plan does not approve any specific projects for new parks, trails, or open space preservation. They would require additional discussion, design, public input, in some cases, area-specific master plans. So these essentially are policy recommendations for this council and future councils to consider as they prioritize different things in the city, but does not authorize the immediate development of any new parks, trails, or open spaces. Since the last meeting with the council, we've added or are in the process of adding 2 additional items. One is throughout the plan, an acknowledgement of private property rights. I won't read through that whole thing, but this is a concern raised in many of the public comments we received as well. But this is just a declaration that as a city, we respect private property rights. And as a city in Utah, we have no authority to use eminent domain for parks, trails, and open spaces. And that's not identified as a strategy to attain any of the recommendations in this plan. So the city has no plans to use eminent domain and in fact has no authority to do that for any of these future trails or parks or open spaces identified in the plan. Rather, just like we went through with the open space parcel preserved near the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon, we would need to engage with property owners through a typical real estate transaction process with willing buyer, willing seller kind of situation, or more likely in a broad scope plan like that, as areas redevelop in the near future or even in the far future, we would require various easements or rights of way that are identified on master plans as a requirement of that new development. And that's not new development as in I'm going to build a deck on my house. That's there's one large lot here and I'm going to propose a subdivision of 3 lots or a rezone or something like that. It's substantial redevelopment. So again, the plan is not a detailed plan of trail alignments. It's not an acquisition or construction plan that would need to come later through some site-specific planning, analysis, design, and public input. And then the other item we are adding, I believe the mayor brought this up last time, is a reference to national park standards to essentially validate some of the recommendations we're making. We're in the process of adding that as well. Now, all of the comments were specific to a particular portion of the trail element of the plan. So I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about that. The purpose of the trails chapter in general is to provide an interconnected trail network, both for recreational trails, but also for active transportation, meaning the use of trails for legitimate transportation uses, in addition to for recreation or exercise. But the goal there is really to create an interconnected trail network throughout the city and also potentially connecting into other cities. And then the third kind of purpose is to provide access to public lands for city residents and non-city resident users without interfering with the quality of life of nearby residents. Now, the main focus, I would say the exclusive focus of the significant number of public comments we got were about the Little Cottonwood Canyon Trail, and there's 2 of them on the plan. So the top paragraph there is just the description of why that trail is in the plan, and that comes right out of the plan. It was just envisioned as a creekside trail that runs through the city into neighboring cities, and just a creekside trail type amenity. The plan's intention never was to build both of those in the future. They were just 2 possible alternatives or alignments. One following the creek directly and one up on the hillside. The intent was to provide a little bit of separation from private properties. Obviously, through the public comment, there are still major concerns with that. So what staff has done is proposed a modification to the plan that we feel addresses almost all of the public comments that we received and the concerns of violation of property rights and privacy and those types of issues, but still helps us achieve our goal of an interconnected trail network throughout the city. And that is to essentially realign the trails. It's a little hard to see. I have a side-by-side on the next slide, but realign the trails to follow existing public rights of way. So rather on the first one, then follow the creek. from the southeast corner of the city through the southern portion of the city. The plan now would show that trail running from the rear of the Giverny subdivision, which does have a trail easement on the hillside behind it, connecting into Danish Road, and then creating an urban trail all along Danish Road, which then connects to Creek Road and runs all the way west from Danish to Creek. And then also providing that missing connection from Danish to Wasatch as well. So essentially now the urban trail network would be moved along the public right of way. The other addition would be to recommend a trail along Siesta Drive as well, another public right of way. But the importance of that one in staff's opinion is we want connection into Crestwood Park.
Yeah.
Because Crestwood then connects up the hill into Park Ridge and the neighborhood up above, up that steep slope. So the recommendation there would be to, again, through the same mechanism, most likely future development, just look to enhance the sidewalks that are there, potentially converting them into urban trails in the future, along Creek Road, Danish Road, and Siesta Drive, connecting then up through Crestwood Park into the Park Ridge area up above, again on public streets. This green line here should not be there. We just were doing some quick editing today and that was a leftover, but that would be removed as well. So the end result is essentially an urban trail system that still interconnects the city, but essentially follows a lot of the major north-south and east-west road corridors. So it serves a recreational purpose, but by following these roads that span the entire city, north-south or east-west, that does provide a great opportunity for active transportation to traverse the whole city in one continuous trail system. So this last slide is just the kind of before and after, and what we would recommend as staff, rather than eliminate the trail altogether, modify it, put it on the public rights of way, which we feel resolves all of the concerns we've heard, but still allows us that important trail connectivity on the southern half of the city.
So Mike, are you going to present this before the citizen comment? The
Yes.
Public comment?
Yeah, and I would like feedback from the council to know if the council supports this modification, which may help relieve some of the concerns that I'm anticipating hearing tonight. But yes, my plan would be to present this. And then if there's consensus on the council to move forward with this, we would redraft this element of the plan that's still posted on the city website. And then this is what would come back for consideration or further discussion at an upcoming meeting.
I want to thank you for doing what you've done here. I've been on the phone probably like you have, or replying back for 4 days, 4 or 5 days now. And going through that creek, a lot of those homes literally go right to the creek. And it just seems like even in 100 years or so, it may take or more, but this is a great alternative to still get people to the park and get it on trailways, roads that are still already there. And I appreciate your work on that, Mike. It's made a big difference in some of my phone calls.
I would concur. I've got a lot, obviously east of Highland is all down in the valley, similar types of concerns and comments. And I think that changes the master plan implementation or implementability significantly. I think doing it along things like that, getting funding for those types of projects is significantly easier. I remember what we had to do to go through to get the big Cottonwood Canyon trail done. It was fairly easy, but we still had to wait 10 years to get the last piece done due to property issues. And that was just one. I just can't imagine doing dozens and dozens and dozens. The 100 years might even be optimistic. So no, I appreciate this. I'm definitely supportive of that alternative. And also echoing, what's happened this last summer with trail building that occurred, in Salt Lake City, where they started a program. Things were going along great, and then people were like, wait a second, And they had to take a step back to look at where the trails were actually aligned and what they were actually doing to make sure that they were being as aware of slopes and cuts and things like that, so that they were being a little more protective of the landscape. So,
Well, I think this is why we have a process to look at plans like this. I think it is fundamental, wherever you see a creek or a rail. I mean, it's fundamentally in planning wise, you try and include an urban trail of some kind, but whereas a city, we're in catch-up mode because we've not been a city that long. By listening to our constituents, I think it's a good compromise. Realizing future council will still have an opportunity to further modify trails and look for other opportunities, but this is, a guide for us going forward. And I appreciate the reference to all the other plans in the document too, from Solid County's plans, et cetera, that helps coordinate those efforts as well.
Mike, I just have a question on the, between the existing plan, the alternative plan.
Mhm.
You have kind of, if you go up from, is it Quail Hollow Trail? And then it looks like there's a little loop there we're in green, you could see.
This here.
No,
Over in the left.
go north. Okay, just go
Oh.
up, down,
Oh, this right here?
to the left a little.
Go in the left picture and then go
That's
see
the
where
that-
it's
Go
Right.
up, go up, go up.
Okay.
Yeah, there, right
Yeah.
there.
right there.
So you, can you, I don't have my Google map open to see where that is. What did you take out there?
So that's the trail that kind of runs through the Willow Creek area.
Is that on the hillside?
Hillside or following the creek.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one line, the way was drawn, we just selected the creek in GIS.
Uh-huh.
So the one line is the actual creek alignment and one is just on the hillside, slightly above it.
And who owns that hillside? Is that private?
That's
property?
private property, yeah. So those were replaced by the line on Danish Road, essentially. We just pulled everything to the east, which then puts it in, this is not in our jurisdiction, so this would have to be a collaborative.
Okay, that's what I was wondering,
Yeah.
because I think I got emails from people that I thought were in Sandy, not
Sandy, right.
Cottonwood Heights.
Yeah, I think so.
Isn't that Sandy?
Some of that was
Yeah,
unincorporated.
yeah. Because when I looked up their addresses, they weren't a Cottonwood Heights
I even got
resident.
calls from Sandy.
Yeah.
Me too, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
that's.
Well, no, it's like the gravel pit. We get calls from all because it impacts them. So, and that's fine.
And so on the urban trail idea,
Mhm.
Can you help me visualize that? Is it just we're saying this is the trail, but it's like not enhanced? Or are we gonna
Well,
try to enhance it?
Yeah, and that can be defined throughout the process, but typically an urban trail is wider than a standard sidewalk. A lot of times it's an asphalt path. It's a multi-use kind of pathway, like what we're envisioning on Wasatch Boulevard,
And Big
similar to
Cottonwood-
the Big Cottonwood
Big
Canyon
Cottonwood,
Trail.
Has some of that on the upper end.
But even what is actually being constructed right now on the two Fort Union Boulevard projects, which is a combination of a wider sidewalk and an asphalt bike path, that I think would qualify as well. So, but wider than a standard sidewalk.
So it seems like with this change, most people should be happy with the change because we still get the connectivity. Hopefully in the future, we get something wider
Mhm.
and it's not impacting people's homes and property values and all those things. So do we have to bring this back to the PTOS to let them know of these? I mean, these are fairly significant.
We sure can. Can your committee, I think in the long run, I'll be honest with you, even those living on Siesta will want that further defined once we get to that point.
Of course.
So there's still gonna be further reviews. It's, again, plans are dynamic in nature. They will change and be modified. But if you'd like to take it back, we can.
Mike, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I think they were instrumental in this plan. I
We
think.
want them. to
Yeah,
go
same
about it.
thing. That's a good point. Both the planning commission and the open space committee looked at this and made recommendations. I think from an authority perspective, it's within the council's purview.
Sure.
We didn't get these public comments when the plan was in front of those bodies, so they didn't maybe think about them or consider them.
But
The
if I
council
was- if I
certainly
was
can
on-
make
If I was on those
modifications.
bodies, I would appreciate the respect of those bodies by saying, here, we want you to know that
Sure.
once you got to the council, we took public comment, here's some modification.
Yeah, oh,
I
yeah,
would assume they both would be supporting because it makes good sense.
yeah, we can take that back. If you want a formal recommendation again, we can do that, or if you just want us to provide an update. I
are
think
you
that's the
looking
council's
for an
direction.
adoption of this separate just to take and put it in the general.
This would
plan.
just be a modification made to the full plan.
Okay, but yeah, because we're working on the general plan as well. You're not looking to put this in with that process. Have
Now, this is
come-
an open space master, a standalone kind of, yeah.
That I think we've been working on for almost 4 years.
It's been a
or
while, yeah.
more.
No,
So
and
it's-
PTOS
it's
has done a lot
exciting.
of work on it, and so I would feel comfortable communicating back to them.
Yeah.
I'd like for them to be able to do a deep dive. I mean, we're looking at a tiny little map, but
So
I
we did that
We
with,
did that.
with the
years.
planning
Oh,
commission
yes.
and the open space,
the revised one.
not the revised one, but we've done a deep dive into all the planning areas. So we can take this back. That will be the substantial change.
Yeah,
That's easy to do.
I would do that.
And then just for my benefit, but so once this is implemented, then when we have a better chance of getting funding for those trails with the master.
One of the first things I'll
Yeah.
always ask you, whatever request, how does it fit into your plan?
Was it, yeah, is there a master plan that got
Yeah.
public input?
And didn't we just get awarded 1.5 million?
Yeah.
We did, yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll send that out this week. in mass communications.
I would
You
hold
took-
off
you
on
took
that
away my
perhaps.
thunder.
I
So
would
just to clarify,
hold off on that.
as far as taking those
What's that?
Public
off the
record.
plate, do we have to go through something else to do that?
Well. I
No,
just need
so this is a staff
should be
proposal to
sharing
amend the plan.
property
And if council's
owners
okay with this, then we will
right?
make this change. So when it comes back to the council, this change will be in the plan.
Okay.
All right, any further discussion?
No, I just,
That
that
item?
is my question. You said we have been working a long time. Is it feasible or a request you would like to get this back in front of the council by November, December?
Before the end of the year, yeah. I'd like it finished before I'm out of here.
We can take it to the
That's Mike's job.
October
this
6th
time
planning
frame.
commission and the October committee meeting. We can have it back in November.
So the people that are fearful about this, can they sleep tonight knowing what we're doing today?
We'll communicate with them.
Okay. The consensus is this.
All right, so
this is-
anyway, on the agenda today, that's the public comment after citizen comment. Then we have it's like 3 action items. We have consideration of ordinance 368, enacting and codifying code and chapter regarding accessory dwelling units. Mike, you want to, I know we've been over many times.
Yeah, no changes since the last few times. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but our plan is to have a public webpage up with all the resources needed to apply for an ADU. The new ordinance will be on there. There's going to be a newsletter article in the October newsletter.
Excellent.
So yeah, any questions I'm happy to answer, but no changes have been made since.
No, just reemphasize that I think we let out and on the parking issue not being in tandem, which requires I thought, so I think that's important to note. Item 5.2, a resolution 2021-46, approving appointment to the Arts Council. Penny Broussard.
Broussard. Yeah, and we're excited to have her be part. She has a great background in the arts, especially dance. She's owned and operated a facility for a number of years, and she's excited to serve. And we interviewed her, and her resume is on the back, and I'm recommending approval.
Okay, any questions on that?
She's very qualified. She was in our last meeting and a lot of experience and a lot of input in everything. So it's
Love to have
great
those volunteers from the city get involved. Item 5.3 is resolution 2021-47, approving entry into a funding agreement with Central Utah Water Conservancy District. Who wants to introduce?
Yeah, I can really quick. We applied for a grant through Central Utah Water Conservancy District for using water-wise landscaping at the Ferguson Park that we're going to be pursuing here. And we were awarded up to $45,000 based on the square footage of the water-wise landscaping that we use. But we're planning to
Super.
use it as extensively as we can.
Terrific. Thank you. Any questions on our work session, or I should say our business meeting agenda? Okay, hearing none, let's move back to our work session where we have several staff reports. Before we jump into those reports, I'd like to take an opportunity and request of the council, because the topics we're going to be discussing are sensitive to many people, both staff and the council. I'd request that we stay on topic, what is on the agenda. And if there's any significant deviation from what's on the agenda, I'll try to redirect the discussion back to the agenda item. Because again, if there's things outside the agenda, the council always can petition to have some brought back, but I'd like to stay on those items that are on the agenda. Also, just like we encourage those who make public comment in our business meeting, I'd request there be no personal attacks on individuals on the council or to staff. Anything is derogatory comments, it's hurtful, it's unnecessary. Let's just try and deal with the facts. We're here to talk about policy and concerns regarding the agenda items. We do have limited time, but we'll take the time that's necessary to appropriately deliberate the issues. So appreciate your cooperation and help on that. The first item under staff reports is our Public Works building. Jim, my apologies, last meeting we didn't get to you, but you're back, so welcome. Jim does design great clubhouses for golf courses too, I remember about 25 years ago.
Comment before you
Yeah,
start.
sure, go ahead, Tim.
You're probably aware in the council retreat, this is one of the items that you wanted us to evaluate, look at different options, rework the numbers based on current pricing. And that's what we have Jim here for. I just reiterate some of the things that we talked about previously, reasons for this facility. You'll see the costs have gone up since the last time. Interest rates have gone down. One of the issues that we have to really look at is what will be the future of costs. And those are things that we can talk a little bit about. Some of the rationale for this facility, I mean, most cities, at least I'm not aware of any cities that don't have a facility, a significant facility related to this, but there are a number of issues. One relates to maintenance of the vehicles in a controlled environment, having a facility for our staff so it's more conducive to resting in between snow events. One of the big issues is dispatching much quicker. I mean, it takes an hour right now, at least an hour or more. I've talked to Matt about this, just to get our trucks loaded with salt because they're not under a facility. If you can have that in place when a snowstorm starts, you can have all your equipment out and fighting the snow instead of waiting to get it loaded. And then, as I mentioned, wear and tear on equipment is huge. I've received calls from people that say, why is your equipment out and the city's equipment out in the rain and snow and weather? Aren't you going to do something about that? This is a policy question, but we're bringing this back from the retreat. And these are some of the things that we talked about before on some of the reasoning for it. So I'm fine if we turn over to him if you're okay.
Okay, Jim,
with
go
that.
ahead.
Well, just real quick,
Go ahead
yeah,
first,
so just real quick, just to give you a brief overview, you've probably already seen this. I think it went out in the council communication.
Looks like City Hall.
Yeah, it's a nice artistic rendering of what the face or the front of the building might look like. Just to give you an idea, also to share with you and also with the public, just as a reminder as we look at this. The area in blue is the Cottonwood Heights Public Works yard. That is the actual yard that we work out of. There's been some misconceptions that we already have a building and we're already housing some of our vehicles. We are not. This that you see over here, this big building, actually this property in brown or gray, I'm not sure what color it is UDOT's property. This is where they house their snow equipment and their maintenance equipment that they use for this shed. So there's
kind of surprised if they suddenly found out it was ours.
yeah, that would be a real surprise. And UDOT also owns the access road that goes back into here, which we share. We have this portion of it. So just wanted to share with you, this is the actual yard that we have, and this is the salt shed that we're talking about, and you can see the trucks lined up out here. An idea, this is the trailer that we use right now as an office, and this area right here is the wash bay for the trucks.
And by the way, on that trailer, we don't own that, we lease that.
We lease that on a monthly.
About 21,000 a year is what equivalent accumulates as far as cost.
So
Matt, can
there-
you just talk about what the county has and on at their facility?
what the county has.
State.
or
Or,
UDOT?
sorry, UDOT, sorry.
Well, on the state facility, they're very similar to a public works yard. This is a very large building that this might be an old picture as well. This is where they house their trucks, their snowplow trucks, and all of their maintenance equipment goes inside of this.
With
And-
garage doors.
Yes, with roll-up garages.
It's closed, yeah.
And then there's a portion of this that is office. Now, like I said, this is an old picture, just to give you an idea of the area, but they have offices, the shed offices, if you will, are housed in here. And over here, they have a salt storage shed, and they also have a wash down bay. And then this right here is their brine mix, if you will, where they store salt brine for use on the freeways. So very similar, just the larger scale of what we're talking about. Different places where they store, you can see different places where they store materials like road base, asphalt, cold mix asphalt, pipes, anything that we use for maintenance. We have very similar over here.
What's the size of our yard? Is that
About 2.3 acres.
2.3? And we purchased that from UDOT.
Yeah, and that was purchased from UDOT. Finding large pieces of ground in Cottonwood Heights was very difficult.
Yep.
It's the yard, and we're trying to make do with what we have. So that's what we have.
Matt, quick question. I was down there today. Are there facilities to the portable potties down there that I thought I saw? Do they have a bathroom?
In the trailer, there is one. Sure.
There's portables down there as well.
I don't remember if we don't have any stored right now. No, what we have, areas that you'll see is these are Connex what they're called. They're just big storage containers that you would put on a rail car and ship them. We have 2 or 3 Connexes in this area as well.
And what's the distance, would you say, to the nearest hotel? Quarter of a mile?
The nearest hotel,
Up there to the north.
it's somewhere up here. Yeah, it's about less than a quarter of a mile, I would guess.
At Hyatt.
Well, closer to the Hyatt's the other one, right there across the creek, yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on, this is what's already built. There's the storage for the salt. You can see this area was built for secondary salt storage, but we actually use it to try to house some of our equipment to get it out of the elements. These are the 2 bays where we keep the sweeper truck, and we work on some of our equipment in here. Just recently, the council authorized us to put heat in that area. And so this is the area that you authorize the heat for, this FYI. So this is the existing facility. Now just get into what we're talking about now. The area in blue I showed you, just show you right now. This is existing right here. This is the existing trailer. This is the wash bay. The areas that you're looking at are proposed. This is the new, what would be the new truck bays where you would pull your trucks in and keep them out of the elements, and also places to work on those vehicles. This area right here is what we would have termed as the office area, as well as and we'll see that in a minute on the bigger layout. So there is city storage proposed right over here on this end. We'll see that a little more as we get into this, but this is, and that picture at the beginning is the front that we talked about. It's right here. You're looking into it. So this is the layout that we're bringing, that we're showing you existing, as we talked about right here. These are the bays where we can store our snow plows. You see, Jim and his staff have sized out snow plows to give you an idea of the size of these bays and what goes in here. More storage. Here's the city storage we talked about. And here's the office spaces that would be for public works. And over here, you have the locker rooms and the restrooms for the staff to utilize. Not too much detail. Jim, who's been introduced, is here to talk a little bit about the project in itself and answer any questions you might have as a council. You've seen this on a couple of occasions, and each time we brought these back and you've asked us to update the pricing based on today's environment. And we've done that, which we presented, and I believe once again, this was in the council communication as well. So I'll let Jim answer or talk a little bit.
I was gonna say, you've covered it really well. I don't know if there's any, basically specific questions that you might have or come up with. But,
Well, one of my fundamental questions
Uh-huh.
is, because we're a small municipality and have a
Uh-huh.
lot of demands and needs, and to Matt and Jim both, and to Tim, is there any value in phasing this? Is that potentially a path to getting it done? Because again, in my experience, once you start phasing it, get some things moving and it comes about rather than just holding off till you have enough money to do the whole thing, because you never have enough money.
And we have looked at that because we got that word back that the council was interested in hearing that. And so we tried to look through that. And obviously, one of the number one priority is covering the vehicles and getting those spaces covered. And that's really we think the number one priority. So that section that you see there on the right, we have tried to design that such that in fact it could be constructed separately from the rest of the project. Now, couple of things to know if that was done, if the council did decide to choose to separate this into basically two separate projects, you would need to continue, of course, with your temporary trailers and that to house the office functions. The other factor would be that developing this, we feel like you pretty well have to develop all of the rest of the site. So that parking out in front, the drainage, all of those things. So we would not save any money on site development. Basically, we would only save the building itself right there. And then, so the one thing that if you go into the estimate that we tried to do an analysis and do some checking with, as you see that office area and city storage area there does total about $2 million of the construction cost. The one caveat that I'll throw back to you, though, if you take a project that's about $5 million and you try to take $2 million out of it, you're probably not going to get all of that savings out of it because it will increase, it becomes a smaller project and it increases the costs of the smaller project, I guess you would say. More general conditions of the contractor are just applied to that smaller project. So we anticipate that you would probably save, in rather than the 200 or 2 million, maybe about 1.8 million in that is what we've come back on an estimating there. The other caveat that we'll throw out too, that and this is just because we've been dealing with a lot of communities, a lot of cities as we schedule and plan projects and a lot of master planning, is of course, then you would take that component and say it's out there 2 years. It's a crystal ball, whether it's inflation, we have to anticipate. So is there additional cost to build that more so than that $2 million 2 years from now? And so those are the caveats, but certainly feasible. It's certainly doable to kind of break this project in half and do that.
I have a quick question. We have what, 13 or 12 trucks now, and we've only got it designed for 10.
Now there is some room to park them in the other building.
Yeah,
too.
we are
I see.
retrofitting, sorry,
Yeah, we didn't mention that
this over here and
That,
here.
yeah, the bay on the right, the double bays on the right, we're outfitting those. We do have in this budget some additional monies to really outfit that for your fleet maintenance operations in there and to enclose and heat the center bay.
So that includes the sweepers as well.
Yes.
Yes.
So we feel like we can get more trucks in
That
here.
this area right here that is not closed would be then enclosed, and we can house the sweeper and the camera truck and various things like that.
So the salt storage would not change.
No, the salt storage would stay as is.
And then the other item that in the master plan that you have room for, but again, that would be a later phase, as you see along the side of the road there to the northeast there, some canopy storage, which is a good alternative for some of your smaller vehicles, equipments, and trailers. And those kinds of things that will greatly help preserve those.
And that's not in,
That's not in the current budget right now.
just the
But there's room,
design.
it's room for it to do it at a later time. So that's kind of,
And, yeah, and when you ask the question about the number of trucks, you are correct. But once again, we're maximizing the space
side too.
that's here. We can't, if you look at the site, this goes right up to 30th East. This is 30th East out here. So there's the corner of the building, and this is an existing building. So there's some things that we're working, constraints that we have to work around to get through this.
Is this property paid for?
Yes.
Yeah.
What about putting offices above those?
Could be placed up there. It's, those are higher bays. Those are quite high. So it would increase the height of the building quite a lot. They're about 25 feet high.
For the base.
I mean, the bays are right now, you've got, we on top of the top of the building, that's a 25-foot tall building. So we would, if you put them on top of that, certainly could be done. It's, we have elevator and stair costs and things like that. But this size of building, I'll just give you my own opinion on that. It's the size of the building, you're paying a little bit of a premium if you start paying for elevator and 2 stairs and those kinds of things for that amount of square footage.
Are you required to have an elevator?
You would
Is
be
it
if it's
the
over
30
3,
foot?
if there's offices up there and you're over 3,000 square feet, you would be required to have an elevator up there.
But would you see cost savings by not having to add do the additional foundation work and other things for the rest of the
yeah,
building?
what
I
I'm
think
saying-
that's where
yeah.
Tally's going.
Typically, what we would
say.
say, the second story is a little cheaper than building out. But I'm just saying when it's smaller, then you've got also 2 stairways. You've got to have 2 exits off of it. So you've got 2 stairways you've got to build. Plus you have an elevator that's usually in the $70,000 to $100,000 category that you'd have to put in there. And
Can you go back to the slide with
yeah,
the cost?
so
Those trucks would also be loaded outside, then moved inside,
right, that's correct.
and then they'd be started up though inside of the garage, so there could be.
There is
Hazard.
ventilation. These systems, we do have ventilation and air scrubber systems planned into this that we put into them so that you can start and run vehicles in there. So that, you try to make that, I guess, as airtight as you can, but we have storage bays and other facilities that have occupiable space above it. That's not unheard of.
I guess the question there is if you spent the extra to do something like that, then what does that allow? Does that allow for extra or other
Maybe a
other
little room on the
things?
side.
I mean, you've got a lot of that office building though is actually storage. You're not gonna want that
No.
upstairs.
No, that's for your float, your city float. That's all the storage we have around the city and different
Storage units.
storage units that we're
So that, I mean,
paying
that,
renting on.
No, you don't want to move that up
Yeah.
to a high level. but you do
Yeah,
it for
access to it is not.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
So to me, one of the first things that comes to mind is how do you pay for this? And the cost benefit analysis of how much money, and maybe this is for Scott and Tim, would we save in multiplicity of auxiliary costs for other things that would be able to be applied to funding somebody? So we looked at that in total. Or,
I didn't
know you
add
talked
up.
about $21,000 for the office and any other storage or.
We are using several storage units around, and I have not added that one up. The office space at the Public Works Yard, that's a rented trailer, is about 21,000 a year. I would have to go add up the other storage costs, and I don't even have an estimate off the top of my head because I don't actually process those bills
That's one.
Public Works, we're paying about $1,200
a month.
for 2 of them. Yeah, and then Ann has 2 sheds, so I'm guessing hers is there as well. I mean, the events, not Ann's, sorry. The community events. And then I don't know if the police have a storage shed around.
We have 2.
Renting space as well.
So we're probably in the vicinity of $75,000 to $100,000 per year.
In a 20-year bond, that's. What is that? That's $1 million.
When we figured it on a $5 million basis about a year ago, the payment would be somewhere in the $300,000 range. Yeah, so.
Can you go back to the picture? Sorry. So if we were to do it in phases. as the
This one?
mayor's- yeah,
I'm sorry.
As the mayor describes, you have the garage and then just down from the garage. What are those? I'm sorry, I
This?
can't see. What is that?
That's the locker rooms and the changing areas and the restrooms
For his staff.
for staff.
Where are the, I thought there was a place for beds and stuff. Where's that?
There is a room right here for a cot or two that staff on a long snow night don't feel like driving home. When they change shifts, they will, right now they'll sit in their chair and try to
Let's go to
sleep.
the Hyatt.
This is where we give them an opportunity to go into a room and just close the door and try to get a couple hours of sleep.
Fairly common item that we've got in a lot of the municipality facilities.
Yeah, but we also have a lot of hotels right nearby.
Yeah.
So help me understand the build out, the basis for the meeting room, the offices. I mean, that there's, I forget how many, 5,000 square feet of other stuff over there. Like, Matt, can you help me understand the
You see
need
the-
for the sort of, I call it phase two?
I'll get the handle of this. So what you have here is this is a break area for the staff. And so you've got kitchenette, these types of facilities here. This is a training room that is also available for other use by the city. You can come into it this way and it can be opened up. This is a movable partition so that it can be opened up into a larger training space here too. So it's-
Pre-construction meetings will hold just various,
Mhm.
Where do you hold those now? In this building?
we will hold them in different offices in City Hall. Conference rooms. We've held a few in here.
Mhm.
But you hold some in the offices over
Yeah, we'll hold some at the trailer up there.
the
We'll
trailer
have
right
them.
now.
And so these are public works functions and staff. We have several that are existing and then also some
Right,
additional
correct.
expansion space on a couple of those. And then private offices here that include, I don't know, you can name those off.
Yeah, you have the deputy directors, the director and city engineer, staff engineer.
And this is a conference room that serves that office area here.
So they'd move out of this building and be over there?
We haven't crossed that bridge, but we are setting it
No,
up.
no, I
such that we
understand.
can-
And again, whenever you look at something, you're looking for
Mhm.
2030, 2040.
Yeah, we're looking a little further down the road.
What's the biggest room?
The biggest area here is that city storage that has the overhead doors access
Okay.
to it, so you can put your float in it.
Good.
And some of those other functions. over there.
storage.
We've tried to put in there. And there's-
Keep in mind that the staff that, we're only talking about 2 of our staff.
Yeah.
Basically going over there, well,
The
2.5
rest are already-
with,
the rest are already over in the
the
trailer.
rest are already there.
Yeah.
Correct. We need space for them.
I know we're talking about this part as far as the offices and that, but what's the longevity on our trucks and what is the difference between being outside and inside? Obviously, we're gonna load them in there, be more responsive that way. But what's the savings, I guess? And do we shorten the term up or can we keep them longer or how does that work?
Yes, we've been asked to try to quantify that a little bit better as far as the depreciation. I haven't been able to find, and I don't believe Scott has been able to find anything where it talks about depreciation for vehicles sitting outside versus inside. It's a depreciation. The issue we run into is the weather elements on these. These trucks have hoses, wiring, and so they go through freeze thaw cycles. In the heat, the hose dries, the hoses will dry up faster, crack faster. These are the hydraulic hoses. In the winter, same concept, things will freeze up. So they go through a lot more weathering, obviously, and it's very similar to you owning a car in a garage. You try to get your vehicle out of the element to give it a little longer life than what you normally would. The insides do bake, the dashboards start cracking sooner when they're sitting out there. It's just the little things that happen. I just brought this along. This is a relay switch that we've changed out. this is what they start to look like. And these trucks are 5 years old, but granted, they are snowplow trucks and they age a lot faster than your regular vehicle. But it's the general maintenance on the smaller things that we're starting to see an increase on. It's a, anecdotal, these are things that are happening. We're increasing our maintenance budget every year for these smaller things that are going on. So
We were involved in a similar discussion with Sandy City. As you know, we've done some new facilities for them. There's a next phase that they're trying to do with some additional facilities. We did some national and they did some national, trying to get those kinds of studies and find out. Most of them came back with things like battery, the hoses, the tires. It decreased the life by about 1/3 is what they said on those. The tire life was decreased about 1/3 with outside storage. Batteries and hoses, hydraulic hoses. And then the additional costs that they were trying to quantify were warm-up costs. For instance, when you're starting those vehicles up, when they've been kept in a building versus when they're being kept out and they're using them in the winter. Those 20-minute warm-ups that they run them through, the fuel costs and everything there. So those are additional costs.
So Matt, are you saying that you're going to provide space here to eliminate 2 police storage units currently and 2 storage units?
depends on what everyone has and what we can fit in here. The number one priority is the float. And then the public works things that are all over the place. And if we can provide more storage, we will do that.
So are we paying about $12,000 a year right now just to park the float?
I'm not sure where the float is right now, to be honest with you.
No, it's not.
It's,
Yeah, right now it's stored with the group that,
the group that made it. They house it, yeah.
in the past, we've stored
Stored in the garage.
For the sake of time, I think it's, again, fundamental that with Scott of financial officers and Tim and staff, come back to the council with kind of a cost benefit analysis. And that cost benefit analysis will talk about savings, expenses, and a couple options from bonding, et cetera, so that the council now can say, look, here's what it would cost total. Here's your options to phase it. And here's the savings, whatever that is, because then you would apply that to any debt service and to see where we are. And then the council can decide, to take further action this time or to say, first year goes back to the retreat. But I think having more information detailed out would be something that I would sure want to see.
What's the plan to pay for all of this?
That's the question.
Yeah.
Once you have that, you can say, okay, here's your options. You can say, here's what my fund balance is. If you went into debt to do it, if you didn't go to debt to do it, you would look at all those things. You need all that laid out. This is an introduction to help make that happen, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, and we have ideas on how we could look at paying for it, and we can put that as part of the cost benefit analysis and bring that forward.
The trucks are going to run out their life expectancy in the next 3 or 4 years, potentially. And they're 1.5 million each.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Trucks are 1.5 million each.
Not 1.5, but they're
like a little under,
375, 350.
a little under 3 million for the, I think 11 trucks, or I can't remember how many trucks, 13 trucks maybe that we have.
But I think we need to ask staff to identify all those things so it becomes real clear. To me, if you have it all laid out, it should become clear what direction we go. Right now, there's a lot of moving parts to me. And if you as a council would like that laid out and to take a look at, we can do it. Yeah. That's, again, I think, fundamental.
So you're going to include the capital costs of new trucks?
Yep, we can include that.
Because I think
Well,
that's
there's a 7-year lease, right?
Well, one is a 7-year, one is a 10-year. We have two separate leases on the trucks. We're about 5 years into it,
so that's a
so
direct correlation
yeah.
to it.
So just in general talks that I've had with both Matt and Danny, they expect that at 10 years near there, we would probably need to replace those vehicles based on the wear and tear that we're seeing on them. You might get another year, maybe 2, something along those lines, but you're going to need to replace them. It won't be 3 million to replace them at that point in time. That's 5 years ago cost, and vehicles have been going up at a pretty good clip in terms of cost. So it will be more expensive to replace the vehicles at that point in time that they need to be
Well, then
replaced.
the impact of those vehicles as well as any construction of debt, how that impacts the long-term financial plan of the city. And does the realtor then say, we can do this, we can do this much? And then of course, out here you got to do tax increase, not tax increase, phasing, so.
Yeah, I mean, so when you had given us the 5, haven't we always been looking at things in 5 years? Was that included in our 5-year look or not?
Was what included?
Vehicle
The new
replacement.
vehicles.
That was outside of the 5-year plan when we developed it last time, because that was a year ago and we're 5 years out when we finish our bond from this point in time. And so that was outside of that scale. And so we did not factor in anything in terms of replacing vehicles, because that would have been in year 6 or so.
Okay,
Scott, did you say they're staggered? Are they all the same age or half of them?
Most of them are the same age. But what, we have 2 separate bonds. They bought, I don't know, I can't remember the exact number, 9 or 10 of the trucks with one, and then 3 or 4 with the other one. Correct. And then, but they were bought in a window of about, I don't know, 2 months or so there.
I've heard
And
2 different things. I've heard bought and I've heard lease.
Well, they're
So-
a lease. We're paying on.
We're playing with lease, and then I assume
is it
that,
lease purchase?
Yeah,
so different than what we have on the police vehicles,
Right.
on the what?
the police vehicles.
Yes. Yeah, the police vehicles, we buy over 2 years with anticipation of turning them back. These at the end of the 10-year period we would own. There would be some salvage value to the vehicles at that point in time that we would be able to recoup based on that. I don't know what it would be, on a 10-year-old, plow vehicle. It's not going to be a lot of money, but there would be some salvage value.
But we're paying the lease purchase on those in our current budget.
We are, yes,
So it's just adding whatever it costs for a higher valued item,
yes.
looking at the difference.
Yep.
Okay, any additional questions? And
I tell you, you'd get hit with the bigger cost that first year, right? It's not amortized equally over the 10 years.
Yeah,
It is equally over the 10 years.
We don't have to pay like, I don't know, $50,000 the first year, and then it goes down to $3,000 per vehicle. You're saying it's equal?
Yeah, it's set up how on the current bonds, and you could set it up kind of any way that you wanted, but how the current bonds are set up, the lease on them, it's set up to make even payments over a 10-year period.
Okay, well, that's a lot of work and some thinking to going to put that in a format that we can see the impact.
And you're gonna do 2 options, right? Option 1, which is a phase 1, and option 2, which is everything. Is that, I mean, that's what I would
It can
recommend.
be
but-
more than one if you see, it gives you 3 or 4 options, but whatever comes out of that analysis.
Would this qualify for any of the funds, the different bonds, and that wouldn't qualify? Because it's a capital.
No, not unless, no, it wouldn't. The Recovery Act funds.
To do what now?
Would this qualify for any Recovery Act funds?
We pretty much got
Recovery
about
Act,
stormwater.
it'd be pretty tough.
Or anything.
We've already spent it, though.
We want.
Just looking for any.
Yeah, any-
I haven't
I
thought.
guess you can apply stormwater for these 2. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's move forward. And we'll look for that information in a future meeting. The next item is something we discussed 2 weeks ago. And we felt it needed to come back for further discussion based upon some questions. And Tim was going to give a little bit more information. So Tim, I'll turn it over to you and Scott
Robbie.
and Robbie to.
Yeah, so we've updated some of the information. I've included it in the memorandum that I sent you. But let me just go through a few things. Since we met last time, one of the questions was, where are the other cities that were considering changes to police pay? And I'm actually focusing on the police pay because that was what you want us to come back and talk about. I'm not going into the budget amendment issues beyond this.
Police compensation discussion based upon what's happening on the Wasatch front.
Yeah, so go to the second slide, Scott. So since we met last time, as I mentioned, Draper, Murray, and Sandy have all adopted new pay scales. So all of these cities, Sandy, South Salt Lake, Murray, Taylorsville, West Valley, South Jordan, West Jordan, Salt Lake, and Draper have all made modifications that are official. They're formally adopted by their city council and budget amendments. That places us right now at 10th, and pay fluctuates a little bit depending upon officer. Go to the next slide.
Okay, but UPD, you said, is not.
UPD, that's not on there. They, UPD, Harriman, and Riverton, they're all considering some changes. They have not officially adopted it unless my data is not there. I haven't heard that they've adopted anything at this point. You see, go to the next slide. This slide shows where we're at. UPD is also included in this. Their ending pay, or let me see, their starting pay is a little bit above us right now. And like I say, they're looking at considering other things. I don't have Harriman and Riverton on here at this point. Go to the next slide. This just shows a little bit more with the scatter plot that we're down. The first two, I don't know if you can see that very well. First two bullet points are the low end and high end on where we're at. We're the lowest out of these entities that I just showed you on that other graph. And then as far as the higher end pay, we are not quite the lowest, but almost the lowest on that. Keep going. Just gonna go through these. We've already talked about some of the reasoning. One of our concerns is the market has changed significantly since we adopted our last pay increase, which wasn't very long ago. And we're concerned about the possibility of losing officers, especially with the amounts that we're talking about. We're not talking about $2,000 or $3,000 increases. These are up to $7,000 or $8,000 to $11,000 changes in pay, which is significant, which is extremely attractive. In fact, there's even some entities in the South, clear down in the St. George, that are looking at this with concerns about losing officers that are coming up to these entities that are looking at making these increases. Go ahead to the next one. So what we're proposing, you see what our current pay is, minimum and max for police officer, sergeant, and lieutenant. This is all in my memo. We talked about this last week. We're proposing these additions or changes, which would give these minimums and maximums on the right-hand side.
Can you speak to that? I think we asked for the percentages to increase. What's the typical percent increase?
Yeah, there, I have that. It's roughly between
25?
No, it's I believe 13.
13.9 on the police.
13.9 on the officer, 8.26 on the sergeants, and 7.25 on the lieutenants.
Wait, say that again on the police?
13.9% increase.
That can't be. From minimum to minimum, 22 to 28? Is my math wrong? 20% is $4.
That's an average throughout the actual pay that would be implemented across all officers. And
So that's all, that's not just officers.
well, the 13.93 is just the police officer level, not the sergeant or lieutenant. It's just the police.
I'm just looking at raw math, 2268 to 2825. It's not, unless I'm not good at math.
No, that would be much higher than that. But at the high end, it would be lower. And so, but the average throughout is that 13.
Well, maybe you could just tell us what the increase is on the police officer, what the
From
percentage.
22.68 to 28.25, so it's just under $6 an hour.
It's like 25%.
24.55%.
And the high end
The
still
low
low
end.
I talked to someone at Sandy City and they were across the board. I think it was 27% they had to increase. The police.
And 10.5% on the high end. But like I said, the overall average of all officers would be 13.93% is what it adds up to be.
So here's a question, Tim. Those officers and higher level police officers, they're not as readily jumping from department to department because they've got to interview and come in at that same level, right? There's only so many detectives and so many lieutenants. We're mostly concerned about entry level officers.
I'm actually concerned about all. I mean, with this type of pay increase, I mean, even if you had sergeants looking at this and going to another opportunity for a sergeant position, for that type of pay, it would be significant. It would be something I know that they'd be looking at. So I have concerns with that. Did you want to say?
Yeah, they don't even actually have to be a sergeant. We have sergeants that can go over to West Valley and not have to have the responsibility of supervision and make the same or more money.
Go to the next one. I just have a few more slides and then we can talk about it. So the proposal as it compares to other entities, what you're seeing at the bottom there and highlighted is where we're at now on pay. The proposal for officer pay would place us roughly at the minimum pay in the third place to second place, depending on you go to the max. Go to the next slide. Sergeant pay with what we're proposing goes, like I say, from that bottom portion up to this amount, which put us roughly in the second range. And third with lieutenants would be roughly the same as well.
What led you to have officers be third and lieutenants
And sergeants.
be second? What was the rationale?
Yeah, it was the pay scale, and it's really, you see with Sandy and also with South Salt Lake, with our pay scale proposing at that amount, it's roughly right within a few pennies of where they're at, and then the maximum pay, we're a little bit above. So there's rationale on that.
So for police officer, basically saying we're in the top, like we're the top, almost one. We're basically, right, if you were to do that scatter plot, they'd all be right near each other. Is that
Correct.
I guess that's what I was
Yeah.
hoping to see.
Correct. They're right. Sandy, South Salt, on the police officer pay, Sandy, South Salt Lake, Cottonwood Heights are all right there together.
And currently, where are we?
Go to sergeants.
Currently, we're the top three currently like 6 months ago before this happened.
We were in the top three. We were in the top three.
The top three, which was almost like number one, or we were like a solid third.
No, I believe we were just right in 2, 3, but that changed really quickly because Taylorsville came on and they, with their new police force, automatically bumped us down to roughly 3.
Well, if it's a matter of pennies, don't you want to be number one or number two?
Yeah, we feel comfortable with what we're proposing with this amount right
Help me
here.
understand what you, in your answer to Christina on sergeants and lieutenants again? Why is that second versus third?
It's just where the our pay range, our
Because
grade system right
From three
now.
to
That's what
second,
our grade systems numbers are.
Exactly.
Most
Closely related to that.
but I know in the county, whenever we changed that, they just changed the pay scale. To me, that's not a real issue. So, but it's
One of the items too that happens is if you come back and you look at the officer, when an officer tops out at $42.68, so we'll just round it, say it's $43. You have to have a little separation between there, oops, wrong way, sorry, and where you start your next highest level, because what you don't want to have is you don't want to have a sergeant who's supervising officers that makes less officers than money. So when you establish your ranges, you got to have the steps.
yeah, because you'll create inequities. I understand that.
And that was one of the dilemmas that we had as we were going through setting this all up so that we maintained those separations as we were going through that. And so anyhow, that's kind of how we got to where we got to.
Go to the next. Oh, I think we've showed you the sergeant and then lieutenant. It's in the same.
We'll go back to lieutenant.
Yeah, go back to that. So you can see where we're at with the current pay, and then going up, we'd be roughly in the second position. Both of those.
So when we brought police in-house, what was the target level of policing at the time? I mean, Tim probably doesn't know, but if I could start with,
What was it?
wasn't it 29 officers?
No,
that-
no,
Back in 2008,
I was here and I was the contract. It was 43.
43. I don't ever remember seeing 43.
In fact, I do believe I have that contract.
Okay,
What was-
you said that was the contract with the county was for 43 bodies.
Yeah, that was the question, wasn't it?
Oh, no, when we switched to
And when we
having police in-house.
brought in-house, how
It was
many
like
FTEs?
we
were
So I
there?
put that in my
We
memo.
started 39.
We started 33 and then that
That was
increased.
sworn,
That was sworn.
but there was also civilians.
Am I correct in that? That's what I had.
What number did you say?
33 is what we started out with.
34, because
Oh, it's 34.
at the time, the council wanted to add it. the dare, remember the Bo Babcast of the dare officer, and then you wanted a traffic officer. Because that wasn't included in the feasibility study.
The 2 years ago, we lost two.
Yeah, and then also in that number, when you go back, there were some on military deployment for years and they didn't come back. And so they were shown as employees, but we actually hired additional people to fill those vacancies.
Is it a legislative decision what the ultimate number is?
What's the budget
Part of the
decision?
budget.
So when did we grow to 39?
Well, over the years, I guess even before me,
I mean, on my 4 years, I don't ever remember having a discussion about what the target number should be.
well, if anything, our first year, we reduced it.
Yeah, it was reduced.
With Mike Shelton, we were sitting here when we took out $300,000 or something like that out of
To
police.
Shelton's credit, he was the most fiscally conservative member, and I miss him.
Yeah, I guess I'm a visual person, so I was hoping to see, by year, number of officers, number of investigators, narcotics and enforcement.
I
Maybe you
asked
have
for
that, you
that.
can print it out and hand it to me. I'm happy to look at it now.
So I'm on
That's
transparent.utah.gov, and it's got a lot. We really only have 2 entry-level officers as of 2020 on transparent.utah.gov.
So we
We have like-
have 10 officers that are under between 1 and 5 years. We have 10 officers with that experience.
How many between 1 and 3 years?
One of the questions I have,
This includes all these, includes resource. Records people, not-
one of the questions I have is because we could spend a lot of time talking about staffing power stuff. To me, personally, that's a budget issue when it comes to annual budget preparation. They were talking about compensation. Now, if the council going forward during the budget process wants to say, we want to reduce the number of officers, that's their prerogative.
I'm just wondering when it grew, because we
Oh.
never had a conversation. So, I mean, who decided it was growing and
Well, it was decided during any budget process, and the budget is set, and it's been adopted.
So we have 7 officers that I believe with our records that are 3 years and less.
7 that we call rookies?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I have.
Well, I'm not sure what we're calling rookies, but I can tell you from entry level 0 to 5 years, we have 6 officers. Between 5 and 10 years experience, we have 8. Between 10 and 15 years, we have 6. Between 15 and 20 years, we have 7. And 20 years plus, we have 11.
We have with, it looks like with benefits, we have 15 or 16 that make over 100,000. On transparent.utah.gov.
I know that the average cost on an officer, and you gotta recall that their benefit load is quite high. The benefit load is just on the retirement is 32.2%. So it's a
Because they
very high
retire
load.
after.
The average that we pay on an officer is right near $100,000 with full benefit load because of.
And then we've got to suit them up and give them a vehicle, and so we're like roughly how much all in per officer.
But that's the same for every one of those entities we're looking at.
Yeah, there was a quote in a meeting the other day that, and correct me if I'm wrong, roughly 90 to 100,000 with training, with equipment, with everything in place for.
I think we would all rather have one really well-trained, terrific officer than 2 not so great.
Well, but our issue is we don't want to be out of market and lose officers and have to start over, and that's why we're
But do
proposing
we
this.
need to hold 39 officers?
Well,
That's not the question tonight.
But if we're.
That's not the
Comp-
question.
Compensation, right?
If we could
That's
give
not the
them
question.
that increased compensation without affecting the public's tax out.
The question tonight, I believe, according to the agenda, is do we want to have our officers, it's the same question we had with UFA and our other public safety department. Do we want our entry-level officers and others to be in the top 3. I support being in the top 3. Now, if the new city council the first year feels that they want to restructure things or go through a budget process as we did when Mike Schell was here and reduce some things because things were tight and other things, then they have the right to do that. We have already established a budget that gives the number of officers. The question tonight is, do you want to look at their compensation and have them in the top 3 or not?
Can we talk, we're gonna talk about top 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah, good question. That's just my personal
Can
top 3.
you, I'd love to hear why not 1, why, you know, why should we be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or maybe that's a question for Tim or Robbie, but it seems to me it's like, should we be comparing who would be above us because maybe we have different qualities where somebody would want to go there, or do we just want to say this is the standard? Like how do you benchmark that? How do you determine that? I haven't.
No, that's a good discussion. I think it's a combination of things. And I supported it with UFA. One is that it only took out the outliers because it can skew. And I lost that discussion and the outlier was included. I think it allows you to be ensured that you'll attract the highest level. And from my experience in our city, that's an expectation of those. When I remember, again, running for election, that public safety, both fire and police, was a high priority, and it seemed to be a high priority right now. I know there's questions, but it's fundamental with whatever police force we have. Do we want to have them compensated at the higher range? And when we went through this process, 6 months ago, we agreed that's where we wanted to be. And we all agreed and put it into the budget, at least in the budget preparation part of it, and all of our staff.
So I think when I started on council, police were 52% of our budget. Is that still accurate? 52% of the budget?
It's not that high.
Yeah,
I'll have to look.
You crunch that.
Police and fire have been like 60, so that sounds high.
So public safety in total is $11 million. The total disbursements from our general fund. Did I do that right?
That's salaries. They have 16,000 square feet, another 2,500 auxiliary and 2 storage units I just learned about.
Yeah.
We're getting off topic.
I know,
I think
they
we
all
should
go
stay on
hand in
topic,
hand.
though. Right now, we're talking about saving. The reason we have a supply and demand is what happened in Salt Lake
The
across the
market
nation.
changed.
The market change. That's what we're dealing with. The market change was caused by incidents. This is what we're trying to do, is keep our police force strong, the best. And if we can, our plan before has been stay in the top 3. And I support that.
I don't remember talking about, sorry, the
No.
top 3.
No,
That-
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
that was something I proposed.
I thought it was a-
It was my
But we've been
standard.
close to that, right?
It was my standard based upon UFA, and I thought that was an equitable comparison. because
And
we're both public
these seem
safety.
close enough that
And when we
that
went,
it
we went
worked.
through it during the budget process, we were in the top 3, and that seemed to be palatable. But if we start talking about number of officers and those things, that's a whole different discussion. And I remember going through that when we first came on, and
But we have the force that we have. That's, I mean, hopefully it's not going to change significantly soon. I don't think that it will if this goes through and we keep everything on par. If we don't make the adjustment, then we will see an exodus, and rightfully so. And that, I think, would be hard to recover from, especially in today's market.
I think we'll always see some turnover in every position.
There,
in
you
everyone.
will.
It's just part of the business. And again, whatever we commit to as Council 5, the next council has the right during every budget process to rethink and review those things.
So I appreciate that we're having the police pay discussion, but for the record, I would like it noted that we were promised a year ago a robust discussion on police reform. And that never came about for a series of scheduling conflicts.
Okay,
But
let me
it just
clarify,
got
let me-
scraped.
thank you. Let me clarify one thing. In our retreat, as January, we identified 4 items that we would discuss regarding your question. And we'll talk about that in our next topic. We as a group identified 4 things that was on the action plan that you all got a copy of. So I don't think we've ignored that. There were 4 items, and Tim will introduce those when he talks about the advisory board, training, communication with ethnic minorities, and looking at the logo. Those 4 items we agreed to in the retreat, if you go back and look at the record. Now, that's what my understanding is.
Well,
This topic is on police compensation. The next topic on the agenda will be those items you referred to that we talked about and were part of that retreat. And I've been pushing Tim to make sure that we address all of those. And the next item on the agenda, we'll talk about that. And again, it's a council of 5, not just me, so we'll do that. So any further discussion on,
I think
Yeah.
I think it's important that we talk about this only because it's a 2.77% hit to our budget about, right? I think 500,000 over 18 million, just really rough numbers, right? It's a budget consequence. So it might feel uncomfortable to the police force that we're even talking about it at length, but I think it's important that we all acknowledge that it's a budget impact that we had.
it's a material amount. It absolutely is.
And so as we talk about it, and the mayor brought up, this level of, is it 3, is it 1? I think Doug, you said 1, Mayor, you said 3, Scott, I don't know where you're at. Are we thinking that this standard, this only pertains to us, like you said, when the new council comes in, they could decide that the standard is something else,
Yep, they can.
right? So we're not holding them accountable. And that's important to me because I wouldn't, that's not something we should do. So I agree with that. But for today, when we pick the standard, we're picking what we believe is the right standard.
No, I didn't say 1. Did you say?
I thought you said 1.
No, I said
Sorry.
the top 3.
You-
That's
oh,
what we're
okay.
trying to do. No. I wish we didn't have to do what we have to do,
Well,
but we have to,
yeah.
we have to stay in
again,
market.
I'm just trying to have, because I look at public safety, fire and police, both critical, both valuable to our city, to our constituents, and where we have across the board support from almost every city along the Wasatch Front to the top 3 as far as UFA goes. That seems a natural comparable to me when I look at police. That's what I come up with.
So with the sergeant pay, are you recommending that we go down a bit? Or, because right now it's at 2, but I know it sounded like Scott and Tim said that was problematic because then you come down into the,
No, with this proposal, it gets us where we feel like we need to.
so we're at
But
number
I hear what
2.
you're saying. To me, if it was 2 or 3, I'd be
You're
fine.
okay.
And I think even a UFA sometimes, there's, because of all the pay scales, sometimes there's a slight fluctuation 2 and 3, but the goal is to always keep them within the top 3, and that's something that Chief Peterson introduced and got full support of all the mayors and of the county. The county supports it as well, and they sit on that board, and it's kind of a universal thing. And
So when you look at the police officer pay, we're 3rd, South Salt Lake City is in front of us and Sandy is in front of us. Are there any concerns that we're below Sandy? Because in all the other metrics, we're above Sandy. South Salt Lake City is always ahead of us in this 3rd metric.
Yeah, so with like I say, with Sandy, we are at the minimum pay, we're just a few pennies behind them, but at the maximum pay, we're a little bit above them. So we feel that trade-off gets us what we need, at least at that point.
And I was gonna ask probably a similar question. If this scale is adopted as proposed, is it going to be a detriment to recruiting at all? Or is it going to be an advantage, or is it going to just keep you on par?
I think it's an advantage because we offer so many other good things in the city, and people we have a good reputation and people want to come to work for Cottonwood Heights. We just need to be competitive, and we also appreciate the parity with UFA. It's appropriate to, if we're going to pay a contractor fire, to be in the top three, then the police should obviously be considered in that as well. And the guys are obviously aware of it. So to answer your question, I think this is a very fair scale. I think Paul and Scott worked very hard to create it, so it didn't create any compression issues. And yeah, the numbers seem, the different change a little bit as you move through the ranks, but they're appropriate and where they need to be. And I think the guys have seen these numbers, and they're excited for it.
What happens if Unified comes in at, let's just say $29, $28.50? Are we all comfortable just maintaining our current status quo, or are we gonna come back in a month and have this conversation again?
You will have my commitment. I will not come back to you again.
I think commitment or no commitment, I think the city council will always be looking at salary and compensation across the board. That's why in the first year, the benefits and compensation committee again needs to look at all of those. And
I guess what I'm saying, if there's any threat of that happening, then we should wait. But if there's no threat, if we're all comfortable with being third or fourth or second or third.
I'm comfortable with this point, but again, what happens in the future, we don't know.
I'm just talking about 3
But
months. I'm just talking about 3 months.
I mean, I'm not going to support anything next 3 months. The other thing that I think is needs to happen, to be frank with everyone here, there needs to be a communication with other municipalities. Not that there's coercion anyway, whatever it is, but we know, and there's a conference of mayors this week, but we need to talk about the impact, because when you annualize this, not just this increase, but with what we just approved all employees, all of a sudden that's $1 million. And if you do that,
Sustainability is a difficult
Yes,
thing.
it's a
Every city
challenge.
I've talked to, and I've talked to 3 others, they're all worried about it.
challenge to whoever the new
All of
mayor is.
It's $1 million in perpetuity. Do we have a plan? Are we already thinking tax increase?
Well, what I've mentioned or said in my memo, and it's on here, is we have had substantial increases in our sales tax. Up to $1 million is what our increase has been from what we had projected in the budget. So we have a way to pay for that without a tax increase. I know other entities are looking at a tax increase this next year to deal with this. I had the conversation with all the Valley city managers a couple of weeks ago about the concerns with this and how they're going to address it. Some are having to look at tax increases. I don't believe we're going to have to look at that just because we've been so fortunate.
I would have a different opinion if it meant an immediate tax increase. I always ask the question to Scott, what is our unobligated fund balance? And it's 4.5 million or something like that. So we do have a healthy budget going forward, but we do have a lot of demands that will come out again. And we have the stormwater fee coming on, helps. So I think we do have a healthy budget and the responsibility to stay competitive in the market. New council may look at that budget and they may want to add, modify, whatever they do, they'll have their own process. I think budgetarily right now, we're okay.
So our next steps would be doing the public noticing for the amendment to the budget, and we would propose to have that scheduled at our October meeting to move this forward for consideration.
And again, each council member has the right to vote the way they feel they should vote, and I sure respect that. And we have a little bit more discussion prior to that. Any final comments, questions?
No,
The next item is refers to Tally's question. And we're going to barely get into it. We're going to have to go into our business meeting and come back. But again, and I'm on public record and have said in these meetings over the last several months that in our retreat, we identified 4 items that we would bring back to the council for discussion. And I think I just restated those a moment ago. Do you want to go ahead and introduce?
Yeah. Go ahead to the next one slide. So in our council retreat, as the mayor mentioned, there were a number of items that we were to evaluate and bring back to you. First one, I hope you can see that, was regular meetings with diversity organization representatives. Since our retreat, we've had multiple meetings with different groups within our community and outside. We've had a meeting with Janetta Williams with the NAACP, John Evans with St. Thomas More Catholic Church. We've met with representatives of the Muslim Community Church and then the Baha'i group as well. We will continue to have ongoing dialogue with those groups, but we have started into that process and we've been working towards that. The next was related to increased diversity and de-escalation training. We included a request in the budget to increase our budget for this type of training, and that was approved by the council. You considered it, approved it. We've already started into additional training. In fact, I won't go into it too much. Last week, and I'll talk about this in my council communications to all of you, we had a significant training related to this. I attended some of that. It was very important for our officers and I think very good in what was presented and I think very helpful. Robbie, you want to comment?
Who provided that training?
West Valley has an on-staff full-time licensed clinical social worker, and she does these types of training in addition to providing counseling opportunities for the individual officers to get them, you know, if they're healthy, then they portray more of that when they're dealing with the public. So that's who we have doing it. I'm working on a contract with her that I can have Shane and Tim help me with because she is wonderful and I would love to have her do a lot more of this training. I think it's very productive and the officers, they can be a tough bunch, but they responded very well to her. She gets them and she speaks their language and she understands issues and she explains it, what they're experiencing and why they act or react. And she's great. I'd love to bring her in sometime and have you meet her because you would be impressed.
So,
Go ahead.
I was just saying, so this is, I assume this and other training is going to be ongoing.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm working on a contract with her now.
Then the next item, I'm just going to go through this and stop me if I'm going too quickly. The next item we talked about was the slogan, solve the problem, with an emphasis to clarify CHPD's longstanding practice of working with others to resolve public safety issues. What I'm proposing with this is there's a lot of differing opinions about this. I'd like to know a little bit more about what the public thinks related to the slogan. As we talked about 2 weeks ago, I would like to propose as part of our budget amendment, doing an update to our Y2 Analytics community survey, asking a variety of questions. I'd like this to be a part of that, multiple questions related to this to get input from the public to understand a little bit where that's at. So that's what I'm proposing with that. And then go to the next.
Well, before you, on those first 3, further questions, I mean, with the ethnic groups, are there other groups that we've not met with yet? That anyone's aware of? I know I met with the Muslim group myself and it was a great experience. I was fascinated by their attitude and the willingness to connect. I enjoyed that. I spent a whole evening with them. Are there any other ethnic groups that anyone feels that we need to reach out to? No, I met with St. Thomas More as well. I was involved in that one.
I mean, sadly, a one-time meeting isn't going to change implicit bias.
Yeah.
Officers need continual relationship development with people different than themselves.
And I agree wholeheartedly that this connection needs to be ongoing every year, quarter, as often as the opportunity presents itself, and if it doesn't, create it. And I agree, and I think that's fundamental. I think it's fundamental for police, for fire, and even for staff.
One thing I was impressed with, Mayor, is those with the children that are grown children with severe autism, about the police force was trying to educate through the mothers of these children. And I was so impressed that I talked to this mother of a child severely autistic and very strong and might not, have all capabilities, but within a week and a half, our officers were being trained in those situations. And I was very impressed with that.
Well, thank you. We even have, as you probably know, have an autism registry that we work off of. We have a mental health group that goes out and works with Solid County and UPD with the CIT coordinators. And 30% of our officers are minority based.
If there's any department in the city that is better at dealing with people that aren't exactly the same as our population, it would be the police department. They have a.
I've actually had people comment on that. Are they representative of our
Do you have any
population?
senior citizens on it?
But by the way,
We have me now.
on the autism issue, there's also a newsletter article, I believe, this month that's coming related to that as well.
So Tim, with those interactions with the autistic community, with the community of color, we need to capture those on body cam. We need to have a policy about turning off your body cam. There need to be some repercussions if it's not on. Like the state of Colorado assumes malfeasance if the body cam is turned off. I think that's a very appropriate response and the kind that builds trust with the community. Because when you capture that interaction, you have that forever, whether or not it's released to the public, but you should have it forever. And now we
Well,
don't have any
that's-
consequences for
Okay,
turning it off.
that's another issue that you can show Tim and you can look at administratively, but today when we're talking about meeting with those groups, as you said, we just need to make sure that it's not just a one time and check it off, that it's an ongoing, several mandatory thing that we are looking for opportunities to not just relate, but meet with, understand, listen, communicate.
Is there an opportunity to discuss broader things like body cam?
Well, I think that's
Body cam
something, again,
policy?
and I hate saying this all the time, and I feel like I'm putting some things off, but with respect to everyone. Any issue like that, or any other issue administratively that we have, if it's a critical thing, yes, we can put something on the agenda. But most of those things, because there are so many things critical to the city, need to come back to the retreat, and we prioritize, these 4 items were prioritized. And then we start going at them, because there's only so much everybody can handle. We're already behind in so many things. But
I
push and get this
remember
done.
you had us each put down like our top 10 priorities. We had a whole email exchange a year ago when we talked about police reform discussion.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't remember it going all the way back to budget and 4 items. That's not how I remember it.
Well, I think that
That was part of the retreat, and that was, we prioritized items
we
on
handed
the
out,
retreat.
we handed out a formal document listing all of those to everyone. Everybody put in their 10, and we added to it, took things out, and as a group, we came to, I wouldn't say a full consensus, but at least a majority consensus of what those were, and those were the top 4. And again, I know in some of our Zoom meetings, on some of the fairly heated exchanges of comments with the public, I restated those 4 items to the public 2 or 3 times. I remember, you can check the minutes on that. These are the 4 items that we've identified. Now, are there more? There may well be, those could come up, but these are the 4 we've identified now that we will deal with, and then we'll look to add to that. I'm not saying it's all inclusive. I'm just saying, as far as our action plan, that's what we've identified. And the next item is one of the big ones that we're going to talk about.
On the meeting with various groups, to me, that I don't recall that as being that's not a new thing. That seems like that's something that we've always done. We've always had to reach out anytime anybody's approached us and asked. We've been willing to meet with and discuss. It's not something that just started this last year.
You're correct, and we're preparing a PowerPoint showing you all the interactions with different various community groups and organizations within the
And
city.
I understand
It's
that,
important
and
to us.
I understand that, and I applaud that. I think it's like when you say capturing some, we need to have that communication even here of how much of that takes place, and it's.
As we commit to these different groups, can we make a pledge to not be politically biased as a police force? Can we make a pledge to represent all community members equally?
I think that's fundamental. I know. I
It's
don't,
not been my experience.
well, it is to me. I don't think it's something,
That's
we
something you-
we take an oath of office as council members and those things. But back to the agenda.
Are the body cams, is that a policy? That's administrative. I heard, is that a policy decision?
I can answer that.
Well, I was just asking Tim though.
It's an administration decision.
It's not a policy.
decision. It's an administration decision, but you want to address that?
There are some statutory requirements. We obviously have
You are
to
correct.
abide by.
The policy as it was established by the legislature, not only do we follow that policy, our policy is stronger than that. We record every interaction. If there's a time where an officer forgets or turns off a camera inappropriately, they're severely punished, which could include termination. And we retain those images and those recordings consistent with the legislative directives, and sometimes even longer, some to perpetuity. So that
Like a
is already.
natural lead into a lack of policy around lying. We don't tend to hold liars consequential.
Boy, you better make sure that that applies to all of us. I'm sorry. Patently
do.
false.
I think we need to get back to the
Anyway.
topic. I'd like to present.
All right, we've got
That was the wrong thing to
introduction of the
say.
next item, number 4.
How little you know.
We'll introduce item number
Badly
4, and we're
false.
going to come back after the business meeting and talk about this. So this will be more of a debate. And again, I recognize and appreciate there's a lot of different opinions, a lot of these things, and we have to just kind of choose our battle and which ones to focus on and move forward. And that's what we've done this year.
Scott, move to the next slide. Next slide. So then there was one other item. You also prioritized in the retreat overtime for snow-related traffic related to police issues. That has been implemented in the budget and funded, and so we'll move that forward in the beginning of winter.
Yeah, I just see that as police reform. I just saw that as more.
I identified it as one of the police
Okay, yeah,
topics.
yeah,
that we
that's
move
why I didn't
forward.
mention it.
So then the police
Sorry,
advisory.
before we leave that topic, is CWC coming back, gonna ask for an amount above this amount? Remember, I feel like CWC a couple of years ago, we had given a little bit of extra money for that, for collective Sandy and us and others.
I don't think we've given money towards them. There was discussion about
Oh, did
that.
we not? But
No.
there was discussion about, it. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered
Yeah.
if it's adequate.
So,
Was it 5,000? We had it, 10,000?
Oh, more than that, it was like,
yeah, it was more, I think it was 30. It seems like it's 30 to me.
Yeah, what we're concentrating on is handling traffic issues through District 4 and keeping people out of those neighborhoods. It's not as much with the CWC thing. It's,
So but 30,000, is that what we all
you know,
remember?
what you saw what we did last year. that we
Yeah, it was
were-
made a big,
Yeah.
huge
It was
difference.
I think it was
And that-
It was in the 32 to 40 range.
So that's where we're applying the
So
resources.
do you want me to stop?
Your district.
well,
Yeah.
introduce the next item, and then we'll adjourn to the business meeting, then come right back.
So on police advisory committees, that was one of the other things. And what we've been working on is identifying what are the best practices out there and conducting research on this. One of the things that occurred is, and I've told you this many times in the council communications and referenced this, I've been attending the Love, Listen, Lead task force with the Utah League of Cities and Towns, which includes police representatives, city manager representatives, and elected officials. And they've been going through a number of different topics over months and months. One of the topics and one of the information points that they presented was police advisory committees. So tonight, what I will do is outline what they identified in that committee as what is being practiced out there in the state of Utah. I'll outline that and then talk with you about direction on this. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I don't know, Kelly, in my mind, I see the police advisory committee or whatever you call it, sort of as embodies a lot of the things you're talking about, assuming that you get a good cross-section of our population. And that to me seems like pretty fine.
And I think that's a discussion, and there'll be a lot of debate on this because,
Yeah, we've got two other short items.
we'll come back.
2 minutes.
I need a motion to adjourn to.
And move that we close our work session and adjourn to the business meeting in 4.5 minutes.
Have a second?
I'll say.
Everyone in favor, say aye.